Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 107 of SCOTONOMICS. It's great to welcome you if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, X, as it's now known, also on Facebook and anywhere else where you're catching up with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Tonight we've got a really interesting interview with Pauline Smith, who's the CEO of the Development Trust Association Scotland. Before we get to that, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Karen van Sweden. Hello, Karen, how are you doing?
I'm good, yes. I just wanted to mention for our listeners and watchers, fantastic article by Bella Caledonia about the Just Stop Oil protesters that have been jailed for peaceful protest. Really concerning to me. And the other thing I was going to ask you about was, how did you get on at the MMT conference?
Oh yeah, well, we'll put a link to when we're showing the video. I'll put a link to that Bella Caledonia article because Mike, the editor of Bella Caledonia, has been writing some fantastic stuff around climate for, well, as long as he's been going with Bella. So definitely put that in. Yeah, I was down in Leeds for 3.5 days for the MMT conference, and it was fantastic. We had maybe about 25 sessions. About half of them were really technical around the kind of application of the lens on MMT and what it tells you, which is interesting. But I think it's much more interesting when you start looking at the policies that come out from using this lens, which was kind of like the second half of the day, and that was much more interesting. But it was great to be able to meet some of the founders. They were all there, and we also had a conversation and a picture with Stephanie Kelton, which kept two of our friends and activists very happy. So it was fascinating. I've got some good content from that, which I'm going to weave into some of our sessions over the next few months. But yeah, there's rumours that there's going to be another one next year in Scotland, but that's all I can say about that at the moment. So yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, it's been a really busy week as always on the economy. A lot of things that we would love to cover in a bit more detail, especially kind of Rachel Reeves' idea of putting into legislation effectively giving over power of the fiscal framework to another body. Hopefully I'll have some time this week to write about this. Kieran's going to do an article tomorrow on pensions, which will be in the National. So please do keep, if you don't already, keep checking out our Patreon site for all of our latest content, and subscribe to our newsletter and the newsletter that we write with the National. Okay, so on to today's show. Kieran and I went down to Edinburgh a couple of weeks now and interviewed Pauline. This is the first time we've ever actually sat in front of someone and did a recording. Hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of it because it was good fun, wasn't it, Kieran?
Yeah, it's nice to do. Yeah,
it's better than sitting and watching them on the screen or interviewing them on the screen. But unfortunately, I've still not got to grips with the technology. So our questions are a little bit low, but Pauline's answers, which are really what you want, are much louder. So this is a really good 40 minutes. Any questions and comments, please drop them in. But Development Trusts are a really important institution in Scotland, and I think it's certainly something that we're going to be hoping to bring more light and more profile to, because these are the types of organisations that we need to thrive if we really want to create an economy that's based on people, place and planet, and not all on profit. I hope you enjoy this, and I'll see you in about 40 minutes time.
Thank you for inviting us along to the Scottish Development Trust Association, or the DTAS, as it's the acronym for it. I wanted to know what your role is here and what led you to this role.
Sure. Hi, I'm Pauline Smith. I am the Chief Exec of Development Trust Association Scotland. What led me here? So I've been here for about 2 years, and what led me here was being part of a development trust for 17 years. So previous to that, I was a social economy advisor, and a bit of the story is that I supported social economy in the East End of Glasgow for about 2.5 years, and so that was basically supporting people, organisations with business plans, financial planning, all of that sort of stuff as an advisor. And one of the organisations that I was setting up or helping set up had a job coming up, brand new development trust that was getting set up, and I went for the job. And I remember very, very clearly someone saying, "You're going to the other side, really." So going from advisor into the actual community development and on the ground work. And I've never forgotten that, because we're absolutely right. So I think going from an advisor into a development organisation, a grassroots organisation, is very, very different, you know. But yeah, 17 years I was there in the East End of Glasgow, and so everything did so much within it, achieved so much for local people, and ended up with 4 buildings, subsidiary companies, enterprise companies, reuse, recycling, you name it, we were doing it for about 17 years there. So yeah, so that led me into this position to support. So flipping again back to advisor, I suppose, but never forgetting actually what I've learned over those 17 years and how tough the job actually is on the ground. So yeah, so that's where I've come from, and that's where I am now.
What is a development trust?
Yeah, so we've got about 350 odd members. It goes up and down, and we've got about hundreds aspiring members within our membership as well. So that's organisations wanting to become a development trust. So development trust is a place-based organisation, so it's in a specific geography, community-led and owned, and enterprising. So what makes it different than just a general social enterprise, or is this place-based and community-led and owned element of it? They can be called third sector organisations, voluntary organisations, social enterprises, but ultimately a development trust has got those three elements and being member-led by people that live within that community, and that's what makes them stand out. So they all come in different sizes, so they're all in rural islands and urban areas right across Scotland. They do an immense amount of work. So some of them will just run a community facility, for instance, that has lots of groups going in, doing social activities, youth services, etc. Some can be running the post office, saving this post office. They can be running a local shop. They can be 100% owning a wind farm. It's just such a diverse range. So it depends, again, that's where that community-led element, it depends what's needed within your area, what you're requiring to do. So usually it'll start off by something that's maybe an issue within the community or something they want to save, but it'll very soon develop into much wider activities and that enterprising element of it to make sure that they're not fully grant funded. And that takes a while, and that's
does that enterprise mean they need to earn revenue from somewhere? Is that what the enterprise means?
Yeah. So a development trust should always be enterprising of some sort, so it's not fully grant funded. And that's been hard after COVID, definitely, people getting back on their feet like it has been for everyone else. But like I say, we've got some really complicated businesses out there, now where they're not just a community facility anymore. They are running, businesses, they're running reuse, recycling businesses, they're running the wind farm, hydro schemes, the post office and the shops, like I say, as well, pubs as well, so wide ranging.
And I see that you have associate members and members. So what's the difference between associate member and a member?
Yep, so associate members are people that maybe help our movement. So we always call it development trust movement for the last 20 years, so just growing that movement. So the associate members that come in are usually people that'll, businesses or private businesses as well as intermediaries or other agencies, I suppose, out there that support the ethos of what a development trust is and want to help that movement going forward. So some of them, the associate members, will provide member benefits to us, so maybe an hour free, BT, financial HR advice, that sort of thing. Other ones will be intermediaries that work with DTAS on a variety of things, whether it's the renewable energy schemes, the democratic finance ownership. They'll be supporting that. And then our full members are community organisations. So aspiring, provisional and full members, they come through that journey with us. From the starting stage right the way through to full members who have maybe been around for 20 years or are just fledgling organisations, 1-2 year old.
But a good idea of the types of development trusts. Could you tell us a little bit about the role of Development Trust Association Scotland and what that does and how that supports the whole variety of different types of trusts that you've mentioned?
Sure. We've got 3 teams within DTAS. So we've got our development officer team, which is specifically just for development trusts and the growth of that membership. We've also got our community ownership support service, and we've got our community shares Scotland team, which is also now evolving into democratic finance. So if I take them one by one, core to our work is the development trust, the development officer support. So key is that development officer support, because there's not one organisation that's the same, not one community is the same. So our development officers provide that one-to-one tailored support. And if they don't know, they'll find the people that do know. So again, going back to what I said when working in a development trust, people coming in and just saying, here's a bit of paper, this is what you should do, this is what you should be doing, these are all the policies you should have. People are mega busy, and we've got to understand they're not doing it because they couldn't do it. It's just they've not got the time to do it, or maybe the knowledge to do it. So our DOs provide a lot of that one-to-one support, and that's the majority of their work. But also putting people in touch with each other in the Development Trust membership. So very much a lot of peer-to-peer support, where people will ask the questions, so they're not reinventing the wheel. If they don't have it, someone else has probably done it somewhere across the country. So we have
the power of that, isn't it? You're able to
your network
together.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much a sort of trusted membership. You know, like they trust each other, where they will probably give you more information than they would anyone else. You know, like because they trust they're growing the movement throughout Scotland. So we've got that instilled right from the start. When you become a member of DTAS, you become part of that family, and you're keen to share resources because you know it will strengthen you ultimately because it's the whole of the membership. So that DO support is really important, but we also have expert help within that, like I said, with associate members where we don't have maybe the expert experience within certain fields, so we will put them in touch with that. We've got elements of funding, so Green Shoots funding we've got at the moment, which is that last piece of the puzzle usually, that hard to find money, where organisations will be able to come to us and say, look, I'm short of 300 quid or £1,000 or whatever it is for a feasibility study or something that's just hard to get.
A
bit like that. Yeah. Things that other people wouldn't fund, we'll probably fund out of that. So they've got access to that. And then a range of webinars, training, toolkits. We've got our DTAS debate sessions. We've got our research and insights team. So we can do all of these things that help in that background to grow that organisation and grow our membership. And then in addition to that, to the side of that, we've got our community ownership support service, which is about navigating the asset transfer process. So helping a wide range of communities, development trusts, obviously community-led organisations, but they don't have to be a member of ours as long as they're community-led and they've got that ethos within them. The community ownership support service will assist navigating that journey, which is pretty complicated sometimes, to take on the community sports centre or the community building. Also looking at churches and historical buildings now as well, you know. So if you've seen how many local authorities are giving up community buildings, you'll know how important that is right now. But also making sure that it's the right decision for them. Sometimes a nice building can look nice, and you know you live in the area, you don't want to lose the swimming pool or the shop or something like that. But it's making sure that it's the right thing for you and going in it with your eyes wide open, to make sure you can access the funding and it doesn't run on air, these things. So we've got a facilities management team as well that helps with that.
I know we'll come back to the kind of finance
Sure.
side, but the question I had on that was that it seems like a huge commitment for some communities to look at a building which is often kind of in disrepair and say we'll take that on. How many people start that? How many initial conversations do you have with a community who said we want to do this, and then they find out the actual commitment and the difficulties? Roughly how many people go through that process and end up with it? Because it is a huge commitment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think with our support, they are able to get to that point. But the drop in it, I don't have exact percentages, but I think about 80% from inquiry, 80% then probably go through into the process. But I'd probably need to look up the exact stats on that. But yeah, I mean, it's a good thing when people just go, do you know what, actually, I know the full facts here. There is a reason why the local authority closed it down and can't afford to run it. Maybe we can't either. Yeah. So there's that. The churches, the buildings, they're lovely, beautiful buildings, but actually what can you do? How do you insulate them? How do you heat them? All of these things are the things you need to think through, because you're just, as local people, you're passionate about wanting to do it and not lose that building, bring it back to life. But that's the ones, the reality check, but there's so many of them that do succeed. And I've proven track records now of, like successfully running them than the local authority or others did. And making them, being creative with the use of the space. So it doesn't have to just be one thing, it's for the whole of the community to come into. And the local people running these, they come up with new ideas that you probably haven't thought about, as a local authority or other who, even a private business that ran something as well,
Because local authorities are not businesses, and they're not necessarily thinking about enterprise, whereas local people can maybe see possibilities of their local area.
And I think that's it. And local authorities are not all local people, to think what the needs were. So if it is tourism, we've got loads of members that are doing tourism, campsites, and like you say, the caravan sites and all of that side of things. And the toilets, the amount of toilets I have seen, but and it's because people don't realise how important they are, and people are proud of them. And there's a lot of communities that want. Exactly, and they just think it is money. Like how much is it for cleaning and everything else? But actually, for tourism, it's important to have public toilets. Even within community centres, they've upgraded. People are proud of these because they're essential. And I do think that that's where it's come to now. That the essential services within these communities that are so important to people's daily life, bringing people to their communities, depopulation, all of these things, they're all mingled into one, and that's communities that are doing that. Communities are actually bringing these places back to life, because they know what's important to them. So, as I said, I could list 1,000 things of different types of things that they're doing with them, but I think public campsites and all of that is a really good example of it. And the third team that we've got is our Community Share Scotland team, which is now evolving into democratic finance, and we're aiming to launch that at our conference this year, which is great. So it's had a bit of a soft launch, but Community Share Scottish Community Shares basically is about, and democratic finance is about launching and activating citizens' investment. So over the last, I think it's 15 years, 20 million's been raised in citizen investments. Now, again, that's funded pubs and shops and post offices and various other sort of elements within communities. And it de-risks it to a certain extent. These are people that are putting their own money into it. Do you know, like they're believing in what they're actually doing.
It's like buying shares in any type of business.
Absolutely.
The community ones.
But they physically see it on a day-to-day basis of what they're actually doing. Do you know, they have a stake in how that shop runs, how that pub is run, do you know, how that hydro scheme is run. So there's lots of examples of different elements that they've raised shares for. And we've just seen an opportunity basically to widen that out into more democratic finance models, working with Scottish Community Finance. We're now we're joining forces with that, and that is widening out bonds. We're looking at renewables at the moment. You know, how do you do community shared ownership, for instance? How do you raise the finances for that? One option is citizen investment. You know, like, so people, we talk about renewables at the moment, making a lot of money for lots of people that are flying out the country, do you know, and shareholders elsewhere. Why should Scotland not be shareholders in that? Do you know, as in you, me, and anyone else have a share in that and a stake in that. So we're just in the process of trying to develop that offer. It's quite complicated because there is a reason why people haven't done it before. But it's doable. It's absolutely doable. What we need is the backing of Scottish Government and others to be able to make that reality, because it needs patient finance, and can we raise everything from the whole of citizens of Scotland? Probably not. So what we need is investment from your Scottish National Investment Bank, others to buy into this, because this could be absolutely transformational in the sense of, for the whole of Scotland and communities right across the board.
SNP invested in any development trust at this point? Because it sounds absolutely ideal when you look at their the boxes they want to tick. Development trusts seem like absolutely perfect for the SNP. So I take it they've invested in loads of...
No, not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. And it's because of the scale. So I would say we're having open conversations with it. We have opened the conversations, and we need to go back with some more of our ideas. But the level of investment that SNP does is I can't remember the minimum. There's a minimum amount of investment. I think it might
be about £1 million.
Yeah, so a lot of our development trusts will require probably less than that, maybe, for a development. So what we're talking about is the cooperative models that they can do with that. So it's multiple investments. But the renewables is a prime example that needs over £1 million, and it needs £10 million in offshore wind and things like that. So so there's opportunity there, and we're opening that dialogue. But I'm very much one to say, we have to go with some proposals, I think, to them. Whether it's government as well as the National Investment and others, to say our sector is very complicated. It's quite messy as well, and sometimes people need pulled together to get that scale that are required for investments like SNP, or even procurement, for instance, as well. Sometimes we, as an intermediary, could pull our members together. So I'm very much one saying they maybe didn't have the answers. What we're going to do is we're giving them the answers, and how to do it. So
now I wanted to ask maybe some more specific questions about some of the actual members themselves. And seeing as how we're in Edinburgh, I'd quite like to know about a couple that you've got in Edinburgh, the urban developments as well. So Action 40, I think I've got a friend who's in that as well, and the Edinburgh Old Time Development Trust. So what do they do?
Okay, so Action 40 has taken over the church down there, and actually it was Ian Cook who was our previous chief exec in here. He's part of that development down there as well, so he knows his stuff. But has also, when I caught up with him, said it's really pretty tough on the ground. Like it's short of staff, employees, but doing amazing stuff. So what do they do? Like, as a community facility, like it's got the camp, it's got various other things within it. They've taken ownership of the building. and yeah, doing great stuff. And yeah, there's a lack of funding and investment into those areas because it's called an affluent area, and that's where the enterprise comes in with them. So yeah, so brilliant stuff. I don't know much about the green.
About Edinburgh.
Yeah, you put me. I know you could have given me. You could have given me another Bridge Farmhouse. I know more about in Edinburgh.
Tell us about that.
So Bridge Farmhouse, just up the road from here, is basically an old farmhouse. So they took ownership of that, the community took ownership of that, and they've got a massive big allotments within their community cafe, event space, etc. So, yeah, working with lots of people with disabilities as well. You know, giving training opportunities, employment opportunities. Just a fantastic space actually. But yeah, it's been challenging for them as well. You know, coming out of COVID as well. So.
That's not the old Gorgie farm, is it?
No, they're not one of our members actually, but they're just they might become a member.
Okay.
But they've gone through some tough times over. I think they've closed down again just now. But the Edinburgh Voluntary EVOC are helping them at the moment. Yeah, and I think that's it. You know, like not everyone has to be a member. What we'd say is not everyone can become a member of ours either. You know, like, unless they have the ethos of what a development trust is. So, but Gorgie Farm, for instance, absolutely could be an aspiring member of ours. You know, because it is community led. It's right on the basis they've got local links with the local people around the area. So they are one of the organisations we will help to become a member of ours as and when they need it, really, to be honest. So I think they're just looking at strategies and, you know, like what's went wrong in the past that they can avoid next going forward.
And what about more rural? Can you tell us about some of the rural trusts and what some of them are doing and the variety that's there?
Yeah, rural, urban and island, they all have quite distinct priorities, don't they? Do you know, rural or islands, for instance, is a lot to do with depopulation. Do you know, like, so housing's a big thing for them. They've got the hydro farms and the renewables within that. They've got the camping, they're off sites. They've got the post office that maybe shut down years ago. Do you know, so rural island, is doing a wide variety that answers those needs. Rural, again, is active transport. It's housing again. Do you know, like one of the things that will come up again and again is that development trusts are building houses now. We may come on to that later, but yeah, it's addressing the needs within that area. So rural, active transport, and yeah, community facilities, isolation. You know, bringing people back. They've also done a lot of things to do with fuel, etc. And yeah, and bringing people into the community facilities and reducing that isolation within those areas. And then urban, very different again, because you've got a lot more people. You know, geography of that and the place is slightly different. So it could be a lot to do with employment, training, childcare, all of those sort of stuff, financial advice. You know, but there's common themes amongst all of them.
A lot of these things used to be done by local authorities. So. And I'm sure people who are watching are like, isn't that what the local authority should do or did do? Yeah. Could you give us some kind of idea of where the need for this has come from? Because, as I said, a lot of these things were done by local authorities. So why aren't they still doing them?
I mean, we asked ourselves quite a bit, and quite a lot of the development trusts have come to me for a bit of advice and help recently. What can we put out into the media as well to say they're not local authorities? Because there's a bit of a victim of your own success, isn't there? Where they have proved their worth of what they can do. So the community is how they can do it and what they can do, the power of community and the power of community ownership as well. So, yeah, a victim of its success is sometimes what I would say, where they have picked up where a community facility is run and been closed down. So they've proved that they can open that back up. They've proved what they can do. Then there's more needs that come out of it. There's a elderly resident, there's a youth work that's required, there's financial advice. There's all of these things that then are required within the community. And they've proved that they can do it and they can do it well. And usually pretty cost efficiently, do you know, where it's, you know, maybe a little bit cheaper. Definitely not for free, and I will never ever say that, because that's what gets taken for granted, I think, a lot of the time, that the communities, if there's local authority or others aren't doing it, well, the community will just do it for free. No, that it costs money. Nothing runs on air, do you know? And this is where there's a fragility sometimes, and there's a misunderstanding, I think, from local authorities and government sometimes, that these things will be done, like just because people care. That's not we need the powers and we need the finances to shift with this to make it, very, very sustainable for the future, So I think that local authorities and others maybe have taken it for granted that communities will just pick things up. And I'm not saying they won't. I just think that there needs to be a mutual respect there, that actually there's the power and the finances need to go with where that decision making is, give them more powers into those areas to make life a little bit easier. And also for local people, there's a confusion sometimes. One of the development trusts that contacted me a couple of months back was very much saying, people come through the door and say, why are we not doing the roads, the bins and this, that, thinking they're the local authority because they're doing so much. Yes. And they're so known, that the individuals are so known. Yeah. And having to make it clear, no, I know we're doing great stuff here, but actually we don't do all this other stuff that you think we should do, because it's the local authority's responsibility. But we're really passionate, and our members are, about the local democracy and the local governance review that's going on just now, because within community empowerment there has been a stage where it absolutely has been empowering communities. There has been lots of changes because of Scottish Government and ownership and asset transfer. All of these things have given people a sense of ownership and given them a sense of decision making within the community and flexibility and creativity, like we talked about before. But actually, when it comes to power, it's not shifted, and there's already structured. These are local governance structures that are already existing that could be built upon, where it does help a local authority, to a certain extent, take that power from here and bring it down here. You're going to get and put the finance and the funding there to allow them to spend it on what they need. You're going to get less waste. You're going to get more buy-in. You're going to get more. People are just going to be able to do what they need to do very flexibly and innovatively. So yes, we're very passionate about the local governance review just now, and the Democracy Matters conversations that are going on just now about devolving more and more of those powers down into local governance structures. And I'm glad to see Scottish Government are keen on it. They are pushing it forwards, and we're having regular meetings. We've got another session at our conference with the Minister, etc. So yeah, and I do think there's a lot of answers in that for community wealth building even. So we talk about community wealth building, more procurement practices and things like that. If you had more local governance structures that procurement was able to go through, or the voices were going to be heard of local people, there's going to be more power there to make those changes required and keep that money within those communities. And I think they go hand in hand.
It's really important to devolve the power as much as devolving the finance.
Yeah, we've been really actively involved in the Community Empowerment Act, and we're involved in the Land Reform Bill at the moment. So I think we've been really successful actually, in getting our memberships' voices heard and what communities actually want. I would say there's a hell of a lot of consultations out over the last 6 months for a year, it seems to be. And that's good because we want our voices heard. So we're influential in the sense of that, and we quite often get the ministers and others coming to us and saying, right, actually, what's happening on the ground here, and what do your members really want? So I think we're a trusted voice in that, and I think we're brave enough to say what needs to be said, when things aren't quite right. Certainly one of our things going forward is the Democracy Matters element of things, community wealth building, and also core investment into development trusts in these structures, but they're all slightly interlinked, because one can be strengthened with the other. If you have the local democracy, you get core funding. If you get core finance within that, and you get decision making powers, you get community wealth building happening more better and happening better in places. So I think they're all interlinked, and and within Scottish Government and other departments, they cross over in lots of third sector, regeneration, economy. So again, it's the departments in Scottish Government who are speaking to each other, I believe, much more than they ever have, to make these things happen, so that they come together to strengthen the economy in Scotland overall, really. Yeah, I think it'd be naive to say that in communities issues don't happen, and conflicts don't happen. We provide a bit of mediation service within that to be able to help and address that. And when there's common parties that want to come together and resolve it, then we'll help with some of the mediation. And there's also wider sort of Scotland-wide services that do that as well. But I think it is about communication, isn't it? Not everyone will agree ever. Within a community, you're not going to get 100% agreement on everything. as long as you can come to a common ground of how you resolve it. I think that's the benefit of it. And that's where intermediaries and others like ourselves come in as that sort of independent voice, maybe to sort of calm any situation down. But there's community action plans, there's local police plans, there's consultation that our members should be doing on a regular basis to make sure that the majority of the community are heard, if not all of them, and to get their views on. So, but then, what other business or government or anything else doesn't have those conflicts as well? Like people have healthy debates, and it's about keeping that healthy to get the desired results of what you require in your community, isn't it? So.
Is that like a lesson that a lot of your members have learned, maybe a different way, that you need to engage the community right at the start, even if you think you've got a great idea and they think you've got a great idea, they need.
And it surprises me still that doesn't happen. Like this movement and our community development has been happening for how long, and everyone's been saying, start from asking is the question. And it's just, it's a simple thing to do, really, to be honest, and to understand. But so I don't understand why that isn't just the go-to. But yes, that is often why communities have also come together and rallied each other when something has been done to them rather than with them. So they've often, it might not be the full idea was wrong in the first place, but actually because they needed a couple of tweaks done to it, and felt in control of it and owned it, and believed in it. They do it themselves, So, but yeah, I mean, it still surprises me that's not the go-to, that you start by asking people a question,
Yeah, I would say that's problematic as well, because we consult as a council. All councils do consultations, but the respondents can be quite self-selecting.
It's not that, and I want to get away from thinking that local authorities are doing everything wrong. They aren't. We get, communities understand the financial pressures that local authorities and government are under. It's just that we're sort of saying, we could help you do this better, and that's always been my language. It's not like you're doing anything particularly wrong. It's literally like we can do this better together. Yeah. From a local councillor, you're a local person living in that area, to the lollipop movement, or whatever. They want to work together to make their area a good place to live and work in. So it is working in hand in hand with that, not blaming anyone, saying you're doing anything wrong. It's just how do we do it better, and sometimes not holding on to that power, or feeling like you're letting go, isn't it, to local people, where that should be the desire, rather, and that's certainly, I think most people would say that the Scottish Government is very centralised organisation, and it seems to struggle putting power out to local authorities. But you could probably say the same about local authorities. Once they've got that power, and it has to be devolved as much as possible, and I think that's the real strength of what your members are willing to do. And it provides flexibility with finances in decision making then, doesn't it? Because we're all there to be supporting citizens of Scotland, no matter who we are. If it's our family, our neighbour, or your constituents, or whoever it is, we're there to make Scotland better. No one is wanting Scotland to be in a worse position. So put your trust in the things that are actually working here, and devolve that further. So and I get why Scottish Government have, they've got the Strength in Communities Fund that we manage, amongst other partners, that goes direct to communities, and some other funds. And I can understand why they've done it, because getting it direct into communities that's not had, management fees and various other things taken on, this is going straight to communities. I can understand why some of that is centralised, and actually sometimes the process is easier. But then you also think, the local authorities need to be involved in that decision-making process, potentially, because they know what's on the ground. But again, devolve all of that into local communities and saying, here's your allocations. Again, I could talk a bit further about the different funding streams, because there's so many of them that make communities jump through hoops of application fraud. Again, devolve them into climate. You've got climate, you've got regeneration, you've got economy, whatever it is. You put them into one local community. Don't tell them what it's for. They're going to address training. They're going to do employment. They're going to address climate. They're going to address all these things that are important to them, as long as they're important to them and they're a need within that area. Allow them to decide what that money can be spent on, though. Is I would say a much simpler form of doing it sometimes as well.
That's bottom up rather than top down, isn't it? Yeah. That really. What do you mean when you think about a resilient community or a resilient society?
I think it's people with the passion, the drive, and the skills and support to be able to do things that matter to them, and that can take all shapes and forms. So I think that the resilience is in the people that live there. Where there is a bit of fragility is making sure people come through that stream, do you know, like, so that the young people come through into the sector to support what's been going on for the last 10, 15 years. So I think that's a challenge at the moment because, again, you know, it's challenging circumstances with funding, etc., within the organisations, but I do think it's very exciting. So I think resilient communities are the ones that are progressively always looking forward, do you know, like, so, but not about growth all the time. It's about succession planning potentially. It's about how do you sustain what you've currently got. I think growth gets talked about an awful lot, and actually sometimes we just need to sustain and you know, make make
things work better.
Make them, absolutely. Strengthen what we've currently got to then grow. It can grow then into something else. That's not to say not to take up other opportunities, like your renewables and various other things that could strengthen the sector. But that's not necessarily about growth. That's changing the way things are working just now. Do you know, changing the systems that we're working within to make the whole of the ecosystem much more stronger. And I think that's absolutely the flexibility of a development trust, as well as community organisations right across the board, actually, because they're able to make those decisions really quickly and efficiently to what fits with them, do you know. So yeah, and they don't have to jump through a hierarchical, you know, it's let's have a public meeting, let's talk about this, you know, let's see what we need to do. We're going to decide what we want and what we need, rather than, again, back to what you said, it's someone else doing it to us and going to close down something. We'll decide if that closes, we'll decide if it's needed, you know, all of that, you know. So as long as it's, you know, that it's their decision, I think that builds resilience within a community, and it builds that, you know, like, I mean, mental health and well-being gets talked about a lot just now, you know, and it brings that community together, isn't it? It's that support mechanism within that structure of a community where people help and support each other, and then on a much wider scale we've got in our membership where they support each other. So,
well, there's so much research that goes into saying that you know, if you're involved in the decisions that that affect you, you have your well-being is enhanced. Even if the thing at the end doesn't change, just having that thought or that potential to be engaged in the decision makes a big difference. So how do you think your members fit into this idea of community wealth building?
Some people get a bit frustrated when I say, you know, like community wealth building, some of it has been getting done already. Do you know, like these development trusts are creating wealth in their communities and keeping it there, is what we would always say. So so there's elements getting done, but there's massive changes that do need to be done to strengthen that as well. So where our members sit within it is, like I've just said, creating that wealth within the communities and keeping it there circulating within those communities. So, but where there needs to be opportunities made in life being made a bit easier for them is where it becomes procurement and things that they can't change. You know, like, so we would quite want to, you know, lots of our development trusts will want to bid for contracts but are unable to because they're too large. So they're on a Scotland-wide basis or on a regional basis, or, you know, like they need to, so that needs to change. But like I've said earlier as well, I think we have a role to play within that, where there could be cooperatives of development trusts or businesses set up to be able to bid for contracts if the procurement's not changing, which we've been asking for it to be changed for about 20 years. So if it's not changing, then let's us change. Do you know, like, how can we fit into that? Yes, how can we fit into that area? I think there's the strands of community wealth building, some of the democratic finance, you know, changing the way the financial systems work, you know, how investments made, activating that citizen investment, you know, the democratic finance is a big part, I think, of community wealth building that can bring financial sort of gains into it. And so, and then we've also got our community development side, you know, like, so strengthen the way the whole governance of things are done and how we deliver procurement and other services within that.
It clearly fits into that overview of an economy about finding the wealth and keeping it in place. You know, I think it's really important. So looking ahead, you talked about a lot of consultations going on at the moment in the Scottish Government. What more would you like to see coming from the Scottish Government?
So I think definitely more flexible in funding, long-term funding. I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anyone, me saying that. I think there's a lot of talk about fair work and fair funding practices, etc., but that requires longer-term funding in place. So yes, that's definitely number one for us. Core investment, which is linked into that. I think, again, the redistribution, or of funding that currently exists, because there is money out there. There is quite a lot of money for different aspects of things. If that was being able to be more flexible and devolved, I think it would be absolutely great for communities to have that flexibility and put extra trust within the communities, actually. So we've got, at the moment, there's funding practices that, for instance, Strengthening Communities programme that's only just here just now. It was month-to-month funding. Why have the decisions taken so long to come to fruition? It's just like you've got people in local communities that are reliant on those jobs and that income, and the decision making is just taking way too long. And so the funding practices, I think, could be changed and strengthened. So,
what about from the UK government? Are you hopeful that a new Labour administration will look at things very differently?
I think there's some of the Labour policies that are beneficial to, like the GB energy thing. I think could help with some of the renewable stuff that we're talking about. If it's but Scottish government, it's SNP and Labour working together. We need to be working together for the betterment of Scotland. So, party politics are quite frustrating sometimes. It's not about bringing each other down all the time. It is about lifting Scotland up, isn't it? So if there's common themes and common ways that they can work together, I think it would be definitely beneficial. We've got our Four Nations partners, and we've always talk about the Four Nations rather than just UK wide. So we've got DTA Wales, DTA Northern Ireland, and Locality in England. We come together regularly to talk about how do we work together. And that's for the betterment of taking each individual nation and their needs and their requirements on what their priorities to them, but there's common themes for there that we can come together. So we work together in the Community Ownership Fund from the Levelling Up Fund from UK government, and some others are bringing some of that money to Scotland, and helping that. But alongside that, we would see our role as, how do we work with our government to, bring complement each other. And surely that should be done between Labour and SNP as well, I suppose. Proving our worth within this sector and what communities can do, and we can't keep staying short term. When short term when even 3-year funding ends, you're back at square one sometimes because you've lost the staff, you've lost the momentum. You've sometimes lost that expertise completely from the organisation because the staff members have had to move on. We need to be thinking 5-10 years. And if you look back to some of the research. I was just talking, and we've got a crisis support service with some other agencies at the moment, and we were just talking about we've given all these reports. There's been lots of research and reports done of what the changes are required for long-term funding and investment into this sector. And you're just thinking, if we did it 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in this position where we are now. So my hope, we're already talking about we don't need to do new research. Actually, we've got it all there. It's all there in black and white of what we need to do and how we need to invest in this sector, which can, will strengthen the whole of Scotland.
Where would someone start if let's say someone has just moved to, I don't know, Dunbilleen, like I have, and they've just moved there and they see something? What's the process for an individual to kind of get to a position where they feel like they're really added to their community through setting up a development trust?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's an existing development trust in any area, you can certainly look on our website, and we've got all our members that are there. It's all open to see if you want to join a development trust there. But if it's specifically an issue within your community and you want to set up something to address that issue, or you see a problem, you've got maybe even a group of family and friends even that are looking to set up. There is an ecosystem within Scotland with third sector intermediaries, so the TSI, the third sector interface, would probably be your first point of contact for a community organisation or a voluntary organisation to be set up. But certainly we welcome any inquiries into us, and we will quite often do community learning exchanges with people that are just setting things up, so they can go to Aberdeen or somewhere else, to learn from what other people are doing, and just get that inspiration. So there's also that opportunity as well through ourselves and through other intermediaries. But certainly you can go to our website, dtascot.org.uk, and you can find out all about our members, and there's lots of case studies on there which will just maybe inspire local people and what they can do if they're seeing something in their area that's a bit of an issue, or they're passionate about changing something. I
had a read of some of those case studies, and as we covered at the start, they're so different. It's toilets to hydro. It's incredible. Well, Pauline, thank you so much for spending time.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
take our microphones off this time, Kieran. Well, thanks for sticking with us, everyone. I'd love to know your thoughts and comments on that interview. We really enjoyed it. And as you said, Kieran, it did feel a lot more friendly, didn't it, when you can sit in front of them rather than in front of the screen. What did you think watching back the interview? Any thoughts that spring to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I picked up on that Pauline said was that concept, or that thinking of, or creation rather, of resilience through looking forward. And that's also reminded me of something that Mike wrote in the article, you know, with the thing with climate change is, you know, of course, a lot of people are feeling they can't look forward. And, you know, the independence movement has a lot of positivity in it, because people can see a vision of the future, and that gives them a lot of positivity. So that ability to look forward, and having the ability to look forward, so important for people, I think, in their mental health, you know, and to be resilient.
Yeah. I noticed just towards the end there, we asked about Labour's policies, and it shows you how quickly things move. But Pauline was fairly upbeat about GB Energy. And today we've kind of learned that this will probably come on stream in maybe 5 years' time. And there was also a comment from a business leader who said, well, why would we allow you to tax us and then expect us to be the organisations who are investing in this? You know, you need to not tax us so we can invest in this. And this just shows you the whole complication when you're relying on private finance rather than public finance. There's always got to be something in it for the private sector. And that something tends to be more money than they put in, or more control of those assets over a longer term. So this just shows you the kind of machinations that happen once you involve the private sector into these areas where they've literally got no business. The GB Energy should be 100% public energy generation company. With that, there's no complications. And, you know, I felt really sorry for Pauline, thinking, yeah, this money's not going to come at you. This is private finance. This is not the objective of GB Energy should be to empower local communities through energy generation. But I doubt, even at this early stage, if that's even a consideration in terms of its objectives. So, yeah, I don't want to put a dampener on that, because Pauline said lots of positive things about the work of Development Trust. But yeah, it just shows you how quickly things move.
Yeah, I think that, you know, any government has to understand that, and Biden obviously did, that the price is wrong, as Brett Christopher said. You know, you're just not going to make the same money out of renewables. The point of them is they are cheaper. So, you know, that the profitability is not there in the same way. And of course, any business is going to sweat the asset.
Yeah.
And that's good business thinking to do that. But when sweating the asset is interfering with your ability to survive as a species, that's when the government really has to step in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before that, Kieran, I would say, but I very much take your point on that. We've got a message from Charles here. It's interesting. There are really big, 300 members, some massive organisations, a lot of property that they're looking after, and it's just not something you hear about. I think it's really interesting. You always hear government policy about creating startups, and the dream is to have 5 Scottish unicorns. These are businesses that have valuations of £1 billion. And what we should be talking about is how many hundreds of organisations we've got that are really benefiting their community. These are the types of businesses that we should be focusing on. It's just not, to use that term, it's just not sexy for our government leaders to go around and talk about, well, we've actually got 800 development trusts. They want to be going to all these international meetings and saying, oh, we've got a unicorn now, we've supported a unicorn. And I think an institutional analysis or lens of our economy through someone like Thorsten Bevlin kind of explains that. We're looking at things that that are ceremonial. We want to kind of show off and be able to talk about it and say we're better than other people. And this is the ceremonial part of every decision that a government makes. And what we're not making is what he called it instrumental. What's the actual thing that makes a difference? And that's the things that our governments don't really seem to concentrate on. And we know that when it's kind of our own wealth purchases come into that as well. What are we spending money on that we can kind of brag about compared to the things that really make a difference to our life? And I think these types of organizations are unfortunately seen as kind of instrumental and not ceremonial in that institutional framework. So it's really difficult to get the profile. So we were delighted to be able to do that. And thanks very much, Charles. That means a lot to us when we think we've put really good organizations in front of our audience. Charles, got another point here? Oh, Charles, you're on fire tonight, mate. Yes, again, another perfect example, Charles, that, you know, these development trusts have to go to the private sector or have to go to the UK government for money. They can go to the Scottish government, but the Scottish government can't use Scottish public money to empower and to put currency into these types of organisations because they don't issue it. And that's why it's so important that we have either a UK government that spends on behalf of the constituent parts of the UK or independence with our own currency to allow us to do that.
Yeah, I think also as well, the point that you're making too about these organisations is, you know, what's wrong with steady state? You know, why can't we be satisfied with that? And you know, what's wrong with steady state economics? You know, I think a lot of people are quite contented to just be bumbling along, making things work, and it doesn't need to be a big star on anyone's firmament per se. Yeah. It just needs to function.
No, that's a great point to end the show. I think most people would rather have a library on their high street than the biggest library in Tayside or Fife or Glasgow or Edinburgh or wherever. And this is what I think we really need to work on, this provision of services for everyone who wants it, and just move away from these ceremonial ideas of having the biggest, the best, and just look at that. And that brings us back to that idea of resilience. These are the types of things that really help our economy become more resilient when there's power and wealth in organisations like this, and not all in the private sector. Going back to your initial point, Kieran, our democracy is so much better for it when wealth and power is spread out across the whole of our community. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Next week, we've got our final interview that we did with Danny Blanchflower. This one's concentrating on his time on the Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England. Might sound dry, probably not to most of you, our audience, but it's fascinating, the insight that he gives into how the organisation was structured and his ideas about what should happen for Scotland right now as part of the United Kingdom were fascinating. So I really, really recommend you joining us next week. And then we're going to have a little bit of a break over August. Not that we're not going to be doing anything, we just won't be doing any live podcasts until a little bit later in August. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Please, if you don't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel, our Patreon site, and also our newsletter. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to reading your article in National tomorrow, Kieran, and see everyone next week. Bye for now.
Good night.